This week, it's not a character that we'll be covering, but a place. See, we often base our opinions of people based on where they come from, and when it comes to the Empire of Isles and the Dishonored lore, it's no different. But it's not the country or the continent that it's situated on that I want to talk about. I want to scale things down some and focus on a city. More specifically, it's a history of historical events in the Dishonored world, and that city is Dunwall. Welcome back, lore lovers, to another episode of Gaming Bios, where today we'll be covering the first of a sub-series that we're currently referring to as World Lore. So click all the buttons while we dive in, starting with the history of Dunwall. Dunwall is the capital city of Bristol and the Empire of the Isles, Bristol being one of the four main islands or crowns of the Empire of Isles. And if you've played Dishonored, then you should know it quite well. The city itself is a heavily compact, industrious whaling city, one reminiscent of the old whaling cities of our own world, such as London, New Bedford, Nantucket, and a few others. Whaling was a prime import-export of many cities worldwide, providing almost everything a thriving town would need. Food, oil, baleen, which is used to make fishing lines, baskets and roofing material, pharmaceutical supplies, pet foods, and even the whale's bones were used for carving, corsets, and hoop skirts during the times. So you can see why a whole civilization was sometimes built and thrived on the whaling industry. Dunwall is no different in these respects, like most cities that size situated on the river. The Wrenhaven. The river is used as a thoroughfare for whaling trawlers, commercial traffic, and even the local fishermen on a daily basis. The sewer system also utilizes the Wrenhaven to evacuate any city waste. And the city is dominated by factories, manors, ghettos, and estates, all situated around an off-centered Dunwall Tower, the seat of the Empire. Next to the clock tower, this building is one of the tallest and most recognizable in the city. Each section on Dunwall is sectioned off in an orderly manner, grouping certain businesses and living quarters into things called districts. There are dozens of districts, each one intended to better accommodate the people of Dunwall. And like most old cities, Dunwall was built on top of an old civilization. This could be a coincidence, or due to the machinations of the worshipped outsider that this happened. But from what we know, the previous civilization was around for about 1,000 years before it collapsed in the 9th century. This information was only recently discovered in 1814, about 23 years before the events of Dishonored 1 took place. So, much like Rome and other ancient cities of our world, Dunwall was built on top of this old civilization and didn't start discovering its past until many years later. As with most cities before modern amenities, Dunwall grew up utilizing the wealth of the seas. The city itself started as a small fishing village over old ruins, and then slowly became a thriving whaling town before transitioning into the sprawling city we see in the game. And the Academy of Natural Philosophy was established as the city grew more prominent. Still, it wasn't until the War of the Four Crowns in the latter 16th century where the city took a seat of power for the Isles of Bristol as it came out victorious during the conflict. And, as with most seats of power, this was only the beginning for Bristol and more familiarly, Dunwall's troubles. The Troubles of Dunwall. After the War of the Four Crowns, Dunwall became the seat of the Empire of Isles. The economy grew around Dunwall and the island of Bristol, and as everything grew, troubles ensued. Around 1801, nearly 175 years after the War of the Four Crowns, the Morley insurrection took place. Although Morley is on another island far north of Dunwall, it was an extremely violent uprising that challenged the rule of the empire itself. Minor strikes, riots, and armed conflicts occurred with the culmination of everything, resulting in Empress Larissa's assassination. As with most violent conflicts within cities of this size, the express reason of the conflict was due to harsh exploitation of the working class by the wealthy. The conflict itself lasted nearly a year before coming to an end. Because of this, Emperor Johann Caldwin implemented projects to improve Dunwall's infrastructure and even created a city watch in 1809. This time, whale oil was discovered to be a fuel source, which led to the eventual technical marvels we see in the game. This industrial age further increased Dunwall's wealth, which also brought a larger population, eventually leading to the following. The Rat Plague of 1835. Even wealthy cities and states have poor districts and populations, and it was in these districts that the Rat Plague ultimately decimated Dunwall's population first. No one was spared throughout the city. Other nations of the Isles blockaded Dunwall to prevent the spread into their homes, leaving the city and Bristol to fend for themselves. It was during this plague that Empress Jessamine Caldwin was assassinated and the first Dishonored game took place. The Lord Regent assumes power and enforces aggressive policies to control the population with force and oppression, causing Dunwall to become a different place altogether. Chaos flowed through the streets, filling them with death, riots, and despair. Jessamine's assassination was all, of course, orchestrated by the Lord Regent himself, who usurped the Empress's place. Still, thanks to the efforts of Corvo Attano and the Loyalists, the Empress's daughter was interred onto the throne, overthrowing the dictation of Hiram Burroughs. Nearly 3 years of the Rat Plague had undoubtedly left its mark on the city and the island. So, under the leadership of Emily Caldwin, presumably with Corvo's guidance, Dunwall entered an age of restoration. Trade routes were reinstituted, borders opened, free movement throughout the city was allowed, new projects, expansion planning, and overall growth were the main concerns again. Within 14 years, Hiram Burroughs and his horrid actions were forgotten, and the city of Dunwall had grown and prospered under Emily's reign, making it the greatest island of the four once more. Society. Before the golden age of Dunwall and the guidance of Empress Emily Caldwin, the city and its people were very divided. The social classes were either poor or at the lower end of society's echelon, or they were part of the aristocracy and thrived. This had been the constant theme for hundreds of years, until the Rat Plague came and all but wiped out most of the city. The Restoration restored order and made people more equal under the new regime. Population. We know that the population consisted of about 2 million people before the Rat Plague. When compared to our own Black Plague of the 14th century, the total amount of human casualties due to the plague was probably about 60% of that. That would be an astounding 1.2 million deaths due to the plague alone. Even more astounding, a little over 200,000 people were left in Dunwall after the Rat Plague. So, that would mean another 600,000 people either perished to the Rat Plague, making it deadlier than any our world has ever seen, or those deaths were brought by the military watch, riots, famine, or other means related to the hard times of that 3-year period. Order. The Dunwall City Watch is the city's primary law enforcement agency. This consists of the Lore Watch, the guards, and the officers. We also see a specialized rank in the games called the Tall Boys. The Wrenhaven River Patrol operates seemingly separately from the City Watch, but has the same amount of power it would seem when it comes to prosecuting criminals. Architecture. The architecture is reminiscent of London, albeit more of a steampunk one in many areas of the city. There are marble adornments, fancy columns, large gardens throughout the city, and impressive bridges that connect the city. Technology. Since Dunwall was the most powerful city during its heyday, it was the most industrialized. The city sported electricity and heating throughout nearly every home. There were walls of light and arc pylons for security reasons, and even more efficient were the Tall Boys, who were heavily armored soldiers who walked in motorized suits. There was also a rail system for transporting goods, but most importantly, a large amount of whaling boats which brought about the city's prosperity. Overall, Dunwall is a city shaped by its trials, a place where present-day beauty and decay coexist, and where echoes of betrayal, revolution, and resilience lie stained on the wet streets. From the havoc of the Rat Plague to the political upheaval of power-hungry tyrants, Dunwall has faced many trials that would have broken lesser cities. Yet, through its turmoil, it remains a beacon of perseverance, where all the other isles turn to in dark times. Its towering architecture, the shadowy alleys, and the resolve of those who fight for its future make Dunwall not just the greatest city the Four Crowns have ever seen, but a home. And in the end, Dunwall endures. And this, Lore Lovers, has been another episode of Gaming Bios. If you like the content, please hit the like button, and if you're not already subscribed, now is a great time to do so. Also, if there are any cities, worlds, locales that you'd like us to cover in a future world bio, please leave it in the comments. We welcome all suggestions. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, Lore Lovers.